I think if you go out looking specifically for a mentor, it's kind of a big, heavy ask right off the bat. So plus all the perceptions that you have about that person being the perfect mentor for you probably are going to be wrong because you've colored a lot of stuff in around the edges that probably shouldn't be there. We all do this. We put people up on pedestals before we kind of know them really, and it can be the wrong person. But just having the intention or the want or the desire of having mentors in your life typically creates the vacuum for those people to show up. And you never know where they come from. That's been my experience for sure. I have consistently seen it where the people who operate at the highest levels are like, it's just a constant mission of where's my next mentor going to come from? It's this insatiable appetite for just wanting to be around the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Community Made Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaynor. Now, as you know, this season is all about how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships. In the first few episodes of this season, I shared 3 unique stories which served as examples of how to reach the unreachable and befriend celebrities and billionaires. I shared my playbook on how to foster deep and genuine relationships with people at conferences and networking events, even if you're an introvert. That's right, no more excuses. And I also shared why the wisest investment is wisdom and how to make the most out of a mentor-mentee relationship. In today's episode, I sit down with Mr. Mentorship himself, Todd Herman. Now, Todd is a really good friend of mine who has been pivotal in my life on several occasions. At the core of everything he does, I guess one could say he helps ambitious people perform, whether that be Olympic athletes to billionaire entrepreneurs. He's one of the most sought after peak performance coaches in the space. And thankfully, a few years ago, Todd decided to offer his wisdom, I guess you could say, to a larger audience by packaging a lot of his teachings into his 90-day year system. This is one of the few online products that I've purchased, and it's fantastic. So for more details on Todd and specifically that program, visit the 90-day year website, 90dayyear.com. That's 90dayyear.com. Now, in this episode, Todd lays out his framework to find a great mentor. He shares his personal playbook on how to be a great mentor and talks about the benefits that you'll get through mentoring other people. A few housekeeping things to note before we get into this great conversation. First, Todd wrote a fantastic mini book called How to Find and Become a Mentor, which served as a foundation for the structure of my last episode, The Wisest Investment is Wisdom. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend you check it out. To get access to Todd's free guide, simply visit Todd Herman, TODDHERMAN.me/blog, or just go to toddherman.me and look at the blog. You'll see an opportunity there to leave your email address to download this PDF. I promise you it's good. I opted in probably 2 years ago and I saved it right to Evernote, and I'm glad I did, because if he were to ever take this off, it would be a shame. It would be an absolute shame. So go to toddherman.me/blog. Second, in the last episode, I shared a high-level overview of a mentoring session worksheet that has worked really well for me over the years. So to get access to that actual PDF worksheet, which also works great for masterminds as well if you're a part of one, visit the resource section of the Community Made group. If you're not a member, lucky for you, joining is free. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. And the third and final thing, I decided to take some of the concepts shared in this season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and go deeper in a live, intimate workshop setting. To my surprise, we announced the first one before season 2 came out. It sold out within a day and a half, so we decided to announce a second one. So for dates and availability on that workshop, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. That's it. I won't keep you from it any longer. Enjoy this great conversation with the great Todd Herman. For context, I've known you for years.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about you more in a second, in the sense that you've been incredibly impactful in my life. But when preparing for this on the flight here specifically, I was really doing a lot of deep digging, researching I knew season 2 I wanted to do an episode on mentorship, and I have a lot of people who who have had great mentors and all that kind of stuff. But you were the first person that like you own real estate in my head when it comes to the word mentorship, and I remember you releasing a PDF a while ago on how to find a mentor ultimately, or just like what that mentor relationship looks like. Because I'm like, there's no great books or resources on this. I'm like, and to me, like I feel compelled, like even like business relationships, like I don't think there's any great books out there that I can point people to. And if there was, then I wouldn't have to write a book. Same thing with mentorship. I'm like, mentorship is so valuable, but there's nothing good out there. So I'm like, that's going to be my next thing. I have to write a bloody book on mentorship.
100%.
But I looked through my Evernote because I'm like, I remember saving a PDF you did. And honestly, I should have expected, I guess, more from you on some level, in the sense that so many people release these PDFs as like lead magnets, and they're garbage. But I printed out that PDF and I read that PDF, and there's not a single thing I would add. It was so like clear and concise. It did a significantly better job than I could have done. And dude, I can't tell you how impressed I am by that stupid PDF. It was really, really well done.
Dude, I gotta sell that thing better than it, because it's out there as my, on the landing, not even on the landing page. I don't even have landing pages for it. It's just, when you go to my website, because I talk about mentorship, and you can opt in and get it, but I really don't even advertise it really many other places. But
because I've never seen you like, it's never made rounds in my like I caught it at one point in time, and that's why I saved it, because I'm like, oh, maybe I'll check it out one day, and print it out, and then I haven't heard about it for the last 2 years, or 2.5 years, and then I finally read it, and I was like, this is gold. Like dude, you should have saw my face while I was reading it. Like absolute gold. And again, awesome. I shouldn't have expected anything less from you, because I mean, I'm a huge Todd Herman fan. We originally connected kind of years ago, and actually on a trip that I did to New York. Probably was my first trip ever to New York, and we were both in a group or an organization. And I think I reached out to you kind of cold, or you knew I was coming, and you said let's meet up. And at the time, I was struggling. I mean, at that time, that's when I was in my darkest of moments of being, $250,000 in debt, didn't know what business I was going to do next. I was stuck in transition. I was getting married to my wife like the following month. My daughter was turning 6 months old, and that was the biggest pain point in my life at the time, was unfortunately my relationship with my daughter. One of the things I realized was one of the reasons I chose to be an entrepreneur is to have as much control of my life as possible. I've come to realize I'm a control freak. So be able to control my time, what I do with it, have the freedom of relationships and purpose and meaning and finances and all that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget it. I mean, there's a few times you've shared something with me that fundamentally shifted everything. And at when we first met, first interaction, I remember first thing you came in, we met at the Reebok gym downtown, and you had a copy of Seeking Wisdom, which has since become, one of the few books that I reread once a year. I don't read a lot of books, but that is a phenomenal book, and I know it's a book that you hold dear as well. And when I kind of felt compelled to open up to you and kind of share that, my struggles with my daughter, and I remember you saying, one way you could look at it is that she's a beautiful constraint, and that she forces you to focus on things that truly matter. And that shifted everything, because things were going in the wrong direction until I heard those words. So that's not the first time nor the last time that you've had a huge kind of impact on my life. You've been a dear friend since. And, one of the things I value most about you is that you are loved by many, and some people may not love you as much, but there's no gray area with you. Like, you are black and white. You are blunt when need be, but you care deeply. I mean, I remember when I did a workshop last year on how we do mastermind talks. I put it out to the public, and it sold out like in the first day. And while it was kind of selling out, I had friends kind of signing up left, right, and center. And then you were one of the few people who messaged me, and you're like, dude, this is great, but you're underselling yourself. And just another moment when it's just getting reconfirmed what an amazing, amazing friend you are. So
100%.
I got to say,
feel the same way. What's crazy about the whole, as you were going through that kind of, whatever life crisis or just challenge that you're going through, and $250,000 in debt, is there was no narrative outside of you that would have led anyone of us to believe that that was even going on. And the character and integrity with the way that you always carry yourself precedes you and, creates a narrative in our heads. So, that's why you've got so many people who are always going to have your back for you. So even though that's the best part is even though, like if you operate at a super low level with the way that you treat other people, and then you go into those dark times because everyone's got to, then it makes it a hell of a lot harder to crawl out of those times because you don't really have much social capital working for you.
Sure.
But at least, hopefully you and I know that, if you do hit those terrible times, you got a great group of people around you who can, help support and bring you out pretty quickly. Then.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, you and I definitely have a strong alignment of values, and our priorities are very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, we both value obviously integrity immensely and relationships. I was going to talk about it later in the episode, but I mean, one of the things that you do that I need to do a better job of, I do it in my own little way, but it's like handwritten notes. You've been doing handwritten notes for God knows how long.
Since I was just about 22. So
and you do, and the rule, or I guess I don't want to say rule, like there's, but basically you do almost one a day.
I do one a day. That's how I start the day. That's my first activity on my calendar. It's not even has to be. It's not even on my calendar anymore because it's just the routine of how I work.
It's a ritual,
but is my. And we'll talk about mentorships, but one of my mentors challenged me to just write a handwritten note a month, and so me being competitive, I was like, handwritten note. That sounds like one a month. How can that even make an impact? I bet you I could do like one a week.
Yeah,
and then it's that magic of getting a feedback loop closed quickly. So wrote a few notes or letters out to people. And again, they're like simple, like on a 1-page sheet. Now they're just simple. They're just on a 1-page sheet. And like every single person I wrote to like got back to me right away. And so now that I've done over 4,300 notes and letters. And I've only not been contacted back about 8% of the time. But like Philip Seymour Hoffman got back to me, the now deceased actor. Daniel Day-Lewis wrote back. Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, and because those actually Ronald Reagan was one of the first letters that I wrote. Responded back on presidential letterhead in the late 90s. But they almost to the letter, every single person will write back with, "You have no idea how much I needed to get that note today." It's just life's hard, man.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't get that feedback loop closed on, how much you've maybe made an impact on someone else. And just a few short words, because I don't want to go into a big, long diatribe with people, but just a few short words is all it takes. I think one of the key things that I do with the letter, though, is like if I, reading Mastermind Dinner's book, there's no sweeter sound to the ears of someone else than the sound of their own name or their own words repeated back to them. Nothing sounds sweeter to someone's ears than those two things. And so I make it a purpose that I'll always put in some sort of substance of the letter that I love what you wrote on page 72 when you said, and then I'll block quote it. And so like that completely shifted. Just like you said, I love hearing that, when I said the beautiful constraint means something to you. Like that, of course, I like that. And so why wouldn't it mean something to you if I said the same thing back to you? But like the words, like that shifted the way that I think about investing in a dinner. Like it was always a cost to me before.
Yeah.
Now it's not even close to being thought of that way. Yeah. So, just one little trick that anyone can add into some sort of,
Did I ever tell you the funny story of because I totally agree, and I do it in my own kind of little way, but I do want to create it's not a daily practice.
Yeah.
And I think it would be incredibly profound if it was a daily practice. But did I ever tell you the story about Adam Grant and Jonah Berger?
No.
A couple of years ago, again, an author will spend years of their life, they'll put their heart and soul into a book. Yeah. Put it out to the world. I don't care who you are. You're terrified of like what people think of it, and just you're hypersensitive when it comes to your work like that. And they get somewhat of a closed feedback loop because of Amazon reviews, but not really. They're anonymous and those kind of things. So what I decided to do was I recorded a video. So two books that were really impactful for me. One was Contagious by Jonah Berger, and the other one was Give and Take by Adam Grant. And so I recorded a video for each of them. And I said very specifically, it wasn't just like, oh, I love your book. It was like, these are the things that I took away from the book. These are the things that I applied. This is how it's going to change my life, or this is how it has changed my life or business, or whatever the case may be. And I sent the emails, and I was driving my car. I know exactly where I was on the highway. I mean, I remember vividly. I got an email from Adam Grant saying, hey, thank you so much for the video, all that kind of stuff. He's like, but this video was for Jonah Berger. So and they're really close friends. So he forwarded the thing to Jonah, and Jonah ended up, he's like, oh, I got a video too, but it's your video. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. My heart sank. I pulled off on the side of the road, and I'm like, what the hell did I just do? You know what
immediately went in it? Because I take, if I've got one skill, it's, it comes from my football days of being in a football locker room where you've got some pretty good, fast talking, cutting people, is being able to like think really quickly on my feet. So what I would do is, you know what, guys, that was actually on purpose. I was trying to make your ideas contagious and see how they just spread.
So mentorship. Mm-hmm. What was your, did you always understand the value of mentorship, or was there a specific incident that like you, because I'm trying to remember even myself, like I would not be where I am without mentors. Yeah. But I'm trying to, like with you, I'm trying to see, like, is that something you just innately knew? Like you had a family figure that was almost like served as a mentor, and you kept that theme throughout your life, or was there a specific moment where somebody took you under their wing?
Yeah, I think there was a. It's like most things. Sometimes you learn your behavior from those people that are closest to and around you. And so, my parents, they weren't big on mentorship. I mean, we were a very simple farm family in the southeastern part of Alberta, Canada. But Dad said to me once, if you want to be great at anything, find whoever's the best at it and, learn from them. He said that, I think, expressly to me and not to my other brothers and sisters, because he knew I was going to be the one who was not going to be taking over the family farm and was going to be, not the black sheep, but, the one who goes off and kind of, puts the hobo stick with the bag over his shoulder and sort of ventures off. And
he was right. You're in Chelsea now.
Yeah, I'm in Chelsea. Totally. I live in West Chelsea in New York City. But I think early on I sort of learned I learned the value of having someone around you who was just amazing. Mm-hmm. So Grant Henderson was my first real mentor, and he was my teacher at Schuler School, and just this person that I looked up to because he was just this great athletic specimen and loved football like myself, and he kind of got me. I was one of those kids that kind of really never felt like most people got me. My Nana got me because I was very much like my papa, my grandfather. And so I think when you feel like you're like misunderstood, you're always trying to find, well, is there anyone out there who's like me or who kind of gets me? Mm-hmm. And then now that I do what I do and I've done it for a long time, it's a very common feeling for many people, like that some people can feel like they're alone in the world. And so when you find someone, you sort of latch onto them, and that's kind of what I did. But I wasn't a coachable kid. I was a terribly uncoachable kid, super opinionated, which is probably shocking to you, but wasn't very coachable. But Grant really helped with that. And then it was a moment where I understood the value of mentorship when I started getting into business, and I came in contact with someone who was at the absolute zenith of his career, didn't know who he was, but managed to sit next to Jim Rohn, who is, arguably one of the most popular business philosophers of the last 100 years. Sure. Forbes named him that. And Forbes, I think in 1999, named him one of the most important business philosophers of the 20th century. And I had known him by then for a couple of years, but I sat next to him, and he got up, and my uncle had won an award in Canada for Construction Person of the Year. I went to Banff, Alberta with him to sit at the head table and, watch him get his award. And the person sitting next to me was Jim, didn't know who he was, but he was just asking me all these questions, super interested in Todd, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And then he got introduced, and he went up, and I was like, oh, what are you here for? Are you getting an award? He's like, no, I'm the keynote speaker. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I just got done telling him that I wanted to speak for a living. And I'm like, oh, I'm so out of the loop. I'm an idiot. And he went up, got introduced, and went up and gave like 53 minutes of the greatest thing my ears had ever heard. He's just an absolute poetic business philosopher, since passed away. But he he did one of the most important things I think a mentor needs to do when he sat back down, because I would love to have gotten this guy's time, and he knew that I was just starting out in business, and he gave me 3 very specific things to go and do. So he gave me some actions, but they were simple actions. Like, they weren't overwhelming. It wasn't like, scale Mount Everest. And it was almost a test. And by the time I got back to my hometown at the time, in Edmonton, I went and did those 3 things by 1:15 on Monday, and called them and said, "Hey, Jim, it's Todd Herman. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the guy who stood next to you or sat next to you for 6 hours at this banquet." Of course, he's going to remember because it was only 2 days earlier. And I'm done those things now. What do I do? And then he called me back the next day because he was still traveling. And, we talked for a bit and gave me another thing to do. It didn't start as a mentorship in the beginning. Just a conversation. I think if you go out looking specifically for a mentor, it's kind of a big, heavy ask right off the bat. So plus all the perceptions that you have about that person being the perfect mentor for you probably are going to be wrong, because you've colored a lot of stuff in around the edges that probably shouldn't be there. We all do this. We put people up on pedestals before we kind of know them really, and it can be the wrong person. But just having the intention or the want or the desire of having mentors in your life typically creates the vacuum for those people to show up. And you never know where they come from. That's been my experience for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much here to unpack. And if you hear me shuffling papers in the background, that's me going through your printed out PDF version, because it does a beautiful job just leaning into the conversation and just talking about the myths, which we'll talk about in a second, and what the relationship looks like on the mentor side and the benefits that they get, and on the mentee side. But I mean, I think one of the brilliant things that because a lot of people, I mean, Kevin Spacey said, it's almost like your responsibility that when you reach a certain level of success to send the elevator back down. Yeah. The only reason I'm where I am is because of mentors. My first mentor relationship. And it's very, again, sometimes when the people hear the word mentor, it's very kind of heavy, and it's also, people have this idea you meet up with this person once a month, and it's like you have this accountability and all this kind of stuff, when it's not the case at all. No. But I remember I was 18 at the time, and I don't know if you remember Profit Magazine, but they had a publication in Canada called Profit Magazine, which was very similar to Inc. Magazine and Inc. 500 and all that kind of stuff. And there was a guy that James Purley. Do you
I know James. So
he was my first mentor.
Really?
Yeah. So the story on how that happened, he was featured in Profit Magazine on a little half-page spread, and about his services. His company would help tech companies specifically get government grants and that kind of stuff. And I'm 18 at the time. There has to be some kind of loan or grant I can get from the government. So I reached out to him, and he's nicely saying don't bug me. Basically, he's I can't help you. That's it. I should actually find that email. And the following month, I was featured in the same magazine, but on a 3-page spread about me and what the company I was working on, and what my plans were for the next 18 months and all that kind of stuff. And that's when I had a personal concierge business. That was my first, official business. And James actually ended up reaching back out to me, and he's like, let's do dinner. Let's go for sushi. And I think it was the first time I ever had sushi. And I was with him, and we met up. And I was probably doing $5,000 or $6,000 a month at the time. And he's like, imagine a day when you're doing $80,000 a month. And intellectually, I'm like, yeah, sure. Emotionally, I'm like, there's no way. That's not me. I'll never be able to build a business that big. About 3 or 4 years later, we did our first $900,000 month. And that's when it struck me. I'm like, dude, I remember a day when I couldn't even remotely fathom attaining $80,000 a month. We're doing more than 10 times that figure. And it just made me realize I've seen the benefits of mentors throughout the years, but that's when it hit me my God, the impact that somebody can have on you to think bigger and those kind of things is super profound.
You hit on something that I actually don't think about that much when it comes to mentorship, but that whole shared brain philosophy, when you get into a room with someone, it creates a third brain. And for you as someone who's trying to climb the mountain and ladder, and being able to just tap into that third brain, because they're pouring their ideas into that ether, and you're pouring yours in, and you get to mingle with stuff that's bigger ideas than your own. It's just through osmosis. It's really hard not to, unless you just want to fight it yourself, not grow because of it.
Well, I may change Mastermind Talks and rebrand it as Third Brain. I got to see if that domain's available. But actually, that brings me one of the again. I've thought about mentorship a lot. I've been a mentor. I've been a mentee. Like I know what that relationship looks like. I know like the do's and don'ts and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I got from your PDF is I think it's about retention. How, because the one thing I always say to people is they're like, oh, I want Tim Ferriss to mentor me or Gary Vaynerchuk and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, listen, you have access to all their content as it is. Like we live in a beautiful time where to what you said, success leaves clues. So follow kind of the breadcrumbs. So
yeah.
If you want Seth Godin to be your mentor, read all of his books, read all of his blogs, and just go kind of deep. And that's always been my philosophy. And there's huge value in that. But the one thing I didn't take into consideration is how we learn and our retention. And if we read something, I think retention, and you have this beautiful, I guess, triangle of sorts, and you're like retention for reading is like 5% or 10%, as opposed to if it's like this third brain scenario and interaction, it goes up significantly. Yeah. And I can look back on my life, I have not been deeply. There's a handful of books. I've read thousands of pages of books, which I don't read a lot of books, but there's very few books that have actually like fundamentally shifted my life as opposed to conversations.
Yes.
The amount of conversations that have shifted my life it's a tenfold.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest takeaways I actually got from that like, again, I tell people to just buy books, read their stuff. Like that's a good way to get access to people you wouldn't have access to otherwise and really dig deep, but didn't take into account the whole retention side of things and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I actually think about it like cutting the fuse. And what I mean by that is I think reading or some sort of passive learning exercise is like, whatever that goal is, imagine it's like the sticks of dynamite. So your goal is the sticks of dynamite that we can't wait for us to explode through that thing and achieve it. And so the more passive stuff that you do takes the fuse and just lengthens it out over longer periods of time. And so that's why, for me, being around people takes the fuse, cuts it basically right next to the dynamite, and that's where I light it. And all of a sudden, you get all these explosions that just keep on happening back to back to back to back to back because you're out there and they're cutting the context so fast. Like if it takes me 2 weeks to read a book, well, if I actually met the author and talked to the author in 15 minutes, they're probably going to unpack the best of the best in that conversation in 15 minutes.
Sure.
So I've cut the fuse. I've gotten to the explosive contextual, mind shift that's going to happen much more quickly. So, and I love the act of reading. Yeah. But I love the act of asking people questions and talking to people way more than that. And so
I remember, it's funny you bring that up because I remember a friend of mine, Alex Icon, has a brand called Luxy Hair and all this kind of stuff. And he was at one point in time focusing on like analytics. And he asked me, or there was a group of us, and he asked, he's like, what are some good like courses or books I can buy? And I'm like, dude, you have a great peer group. Please. I'm like, somebody like hopping on the phone with a Gary Nealon for 30 minutes will give you more like insights. Value and insights, contextual insights in 30 minutes than you would reading 15 books. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point to kind of hit on. Yeah. So, what are some of the myths regarding
that it's a take? That's the biggest myth. That mentorship is all about a take and there's no give on the other side of the equation. When in fact there's just as much of a give and take on the mentor's side as well, right? Like, think about it. Like there are, if it's in the kind of thought leader world, approaching someone who kind of makes money off of their ideas, that's maybe a bigger ask.
Yeah.
That's why I actually don't go to many people that are that sell their kind of, ideas, as opposed to going to in other arenas, whether it's, some sort of financial investor here in New York City. And because there's a lot of people who they'd love to give back to someone who's hungry, especially.
Sure.
So there's a total win on the mentor side as well, especially, and this is where you got to be very mindful of the type of person that you are and what you're bringing to the table. But if you're a desperate person looking to be saved, that is such a big ask. And I mean, it's, I don't want to be so responsible for your success that I've got to somehow save you. So if you're looking for saviors, this is not the conversation that you want to be listening to right now. Mm-hmm. But if you're someone who's hungry, you're going to do the work. I mean, that's so rewarding on the mentor side to see, like, man, someone's applying my stuff. And
100%, yeah.
Geez, they're actually getting some results. Really cool, because this stuff was just theory in my head before.
Yeah, sure.
Or it worked for me. Now it's working for someone else. Imagine that. So, hunger and showing that hunger is a big part of the equation for a win for the mentor.
I actually smile. I shouldn't be. I've never pulled out my phone in an interview. But did you see the post that James Purley made?
No.
Oddly enough, we're bringing up James again. It was hilarious. He posted it to Facebook yesterday. Let's see if I can pull it up. It'll be like 3 seconds. He said, "I learned from the mistakes of other people who have followed my advice."
That's gold.
But I remember, and that's one of the things I love. So one of the things I love, again, what Jim Rohn did was he made you do 3 things.
Yeah.
And that loses so many people.
Yeah. He said that to me. He's like, you're the first person to ever call me back. Like, he's like, other people have called me back, but like months later.
Yeah.
And he gave me 3 simple, like, they're pretty simple, basic, tasks. But I was the first person to call him back like that. So that showed hunger, that showed a willingness to be coached, that showed someone who was invested in their own success then as well.
Yeah.
Not just, proclamating something and, I'm going to go do this and, we'll see.
Sure.
Right? It's the classic we'll see.
100%. Like, it's for me, like, the people that, one of the things I just preach to people is, like, you need to be somebody worth investing in. Mm-hmm. And you need to take action. Like, you don't have to take everything piece of information as like gospel and you have to do everything, but you have to, apply it and see how it works for you and those kind of things. Because nothing is worse than like, and I got to do a better job myself as like when people reach out to me for mentoring is creating a couple kind of hoops that they have to jump through because you lose so much. Even like when people ask me for introduction, this is a great example. Yeah. When people ask me to introduce them to people, I used to blindly do it. Like, I would do a double opt-in intro and reach out to the other person first and say, Todd's a great friend, blah, blah, blah. Would you be open to the introduction? And they'd almost always say yes. But then the one thing I realized is I started asking the question, what's your desired outcome for the introduction? And then I'll make the introduction. Yeah. I'd lose 90% of the people because they didn't have like a clear ask or those kind of things. Yeah. And in the context of mentorship, again, like not a lot of people are willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. And if you put a few hoops that they have to jump through kind of early on, like for me, I get energized and excited supporting somebody who applies things and has success and I can live kind of vicariously through them. Oddly enough, the people I've had the biggest success with when it comes to mentoring are the people who are like former athletes or have achieved some level of greatness in a different field. Because they'll just, they know like how to overcome, just that rut that we run into and all those kind of things. Yeah. Have you seen any commonalities like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of it's my own personal story. I mean, people know that I've got my sports business, and so on the business side, for people who come into my kind of business performance world, they have a very strong, typical sports narrative. What's really funny, I was talking to Tony Robbins' team because he interviewed me last year, actually on the context of alter ego. He had heard about it, and he's like, all right, well, we got to get this guy on here to talk about this. And they kept on pinging me all last year because it was their number 1 most downloaded podcast all year long.
No way, wow.
Yeah. But when I was talking to his team, I stopped partway through and I said, because there's 2 ladies, I said, are both of you volleyball players? And they said, oh my goodness, how did you know that? And one of them had played at, I think it was Boston College, and the other one was at like Princeton. And I was like, oh, it's just the number 1, it's not even close, by far and away, the number 1 sport I get reached out to from after people are leaving college to like do what I did in sport are volleyball players.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really weird phenomenon. I kind of gave them my philosophy or my summary on why that was, but anyways, not long story short, but yeah, a lot of athletes reach out. They get it. They get just, you got to put in the work and the effort. I was going to say too, like around, if you are mentoring someone or when someone does reach out to you, don't pull out what I call the Ace of Spades card, which is give them the most challenging thing possible, because it just feeds. I mean, you're like, oh, this will disqualify them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't be that big of a dick about it. Like, you can give them a 5 of hearts.
Yeah.
You can give them something that's doable, but a bit of a stretch.
Sure.
And that's what was great about what Jim gave me, was he gave me some stretch cards, but not something that was like completely insurmountable to block me out of possibly getting something from him.
So where does one... So again, one thing I love about this PDF, and we'll share the link for this PDF. Is it still out there?
Yeah. It's on my homepage.
At
toddherman.me.
Yeah, dude. You got to pump that a little more, because it is it's gold. So one thing you talk about is the where does one start, which is like the biggest question everybody kind of asks me. And you actually have this little great graph with that's like shaped like a T or what have you.
Yeah. Well, let me see it, because I wrote that such a long time.
I know, dude.
Because you dump so many things into it.
Some people talk to me about mastermind dinners. I'm like, dude, I don't remember anything I said in that book. As soon as I wrote it down, I forgot about everything.
Yeah.
Where is it? It's in here. This one.
Yeah.
There's
the
there's
XYF.
that.
Yeah.
There's the preparation checklist. The match.
Yeah. There's lots of places to start, even if we don't find it.
Yeah.
It's in my head anyway, but yeah.
Mentoring who needs it. Everybody needs it. This was a great chart too.
Mentoring and coaching.
This one, directive.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like a lawyer. I have so many papers on the table. And this was my favorite quote out of all your quotes.
Yeah, Zig's.
Zig Ziglar, a lot of people have gone further than they thought they could because someone else thought they could.
Yeah.
The importance of belief. I mean, the amount of times, again, that somebody believed in me when I didn't necessarily believe in myself.
What a champion of
Profound.
person. Actually, you know what's funny about Zig is there's a lot of people who dismiss. So Zig Ziglar, if you don't know, I mean, another great motivational guys and sales trainers from the I was going to say, really weird to say 1900s. But some people, this is the whole baby bathwater thing.
Yeah.
Is because Zig has so much religious context in his stuff, they completely throw away everything that he says. And while I'm not a super religious person by any stretch of the imagination, I just have great reverence for his thinking power and the great things that he does say. But this is my point is, don't go to a mentor for everything. Jim taught me this really early on, and we were about 1.5 years into our relationship, and he stopped me one day and he's like, Todd, stop putting me on a pedestal. This is a really uncomfortable position for me. I don't like it up here, because what's going to happen is one day you're going to find out a bit of information about me, or I'm going to say something that's going to make you upset. And now you're not going to like me anymore, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to dismiss and throw away every single piece of advice that I gave you. And then you're going to wonder if I just sent you down, a series of roads, and that's why your success got extended even longer because you were listening to some dope. Mm. You can't do that. I'm good at a few things. Listen to those few things. Yeah. Because what he was referring to is, he's been divorced. So if you found that out later and he's talking to you about relationships and you're like, but the guy got divorced.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot of people who, have gotten divorced. They can still give you great relationship conversation. Like maybe it's the what not to do sometimes, but it doesn't mean that all the relationships suck. Yeah. They just happen to really not be successful with that.
This was actually, I reached a little bit of a lull when it came to the thirst of being a mentee, where my initial goals, and you talk about goals, and we'll talk about that in a second, like having clarity around like what you want to achieve so that you can find a mentor to kind of support you in that. But my goals initially were all about making money. So I had mentors who helped me in that department tremendously, but it didn't have like the personal life I aspired to, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I realized I was on the wrong path. I chose the wrong goals. I had a hard time finding the next mentor because I was trying to find a mentor who was a full package, and I could not find that said mentor. And it took me, honestly, like 2 years to realize, why don't I just start focusing on certain areas? So, like, have a mentor when it comes to relationships, or have a mentor when it comes to parenting. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Loop back on the benefits, because you put it in here, and I thought they were great. So the benefits to the mentor, because this is something, again, the mentor benefits aren't often talked about. So satisfaction of seeing someone else grow, an opportunity to be challenged, an opportunity to lead and inspire someone who's ambitious, opportunity to take time out and reflect, because oftentimes, we don't. Like, to be able to like teach somebody, and you really have to sit with a lot of like your philosophies and stuff like that, and you get significantly more kind of clarity, and it's just hugely beneficial. Which actually ties to improves and refreshes a mentor's skills and experiences, gives new insights into mentor's own working relationships. So there's a ton of benefits to being a mentor.
Well, and the one thing that I learned as well is the massive reward of being around what I think are shooting stars. So
100%.
Like, if someone ends up reaching out to you for mentorship. And again, like I said at the beginning, don't go out that way with that big ask. Just start building a relationship with someone. And if it evolves into something great, then great. But don't ask for the mentor thing. That shouldn't be the first email.
Yeah.
I really would like you as a mentor.
No, the minute you throw a label on it, it just dies.
It kills it. But when you meet someone, or when you've got someone that you're quote unquote mentoring, and they're a shooting star, they're going to take you to places as well that you didn't know that you were going to be going to. It's that people say, oh, well, even in business, like when you find someone who you know they're going to start their own business one day anyway, they're not going to be in your business that long, so why would I? I'm like, the impact that person can make in 6 months in your business. Yeah. Plus, don't forget, they're going to be going on and starting their own business, and you have no idea if they're going to loop back around and bring you along on to, or they'll never forget the person that took a chance on them when other people kept on saying, no, you're too entrepreneurial, and they go, you know what, I never forgot that Jason was, and now that they're running Tesla, they bring you in to talk. It happens all the time.
You can't. I mean, I've definitely learned, like, you can't connect the dots looking forward. The whole, like, Steve Jobs saying, and for me, like, one of my beliefs or philosophies around relationships is amazing people become increasingly amazing over time. So if you can invest in people, one of the reasons for the podcast is just mentorship at scale. It gives me the ability to take a lot of what I learn and just put it out there. And instead of doing it one-on-one, which I still do from time to time, enables me to have 10,000 people I'm mentoring, or they're getting lessons from people like you and that kind of stuff. But it's even funny, the whole thing with James, who was my first mentor, 6 years later, he's paying to come to mastermind talks. And then I opened him up to a whole new community of people that he didn't kind of have, wouldn't have had access to otherwise, and all that kind of stuff. So the one question I'll keep that for a little later, but the reason I want to highlight the benefits to a mentor is oftentimes people are, again, go into it thinking it's very much a taking scenario, and that keeps them from asking in the first place.
Well, you think about it from the context of big brothers, big sisters, right? Who's the one who ends up getting the most out of it?
Sure.
It's the big brother and the big sister a lot of times. I mean, they both get a ton out of it. Not that we're supposed to compare between the two, but anyone who's done it, I've done it. I've done big brothers, big sisters. And I mean, the rewards that you get out of that relationship, and it translates perfectly into mentorship as well, if you go in with the right attitude with it.
Yeah. So what are some ways that one, so if somebody knows that they need a mentor, they need some kind of guidance. Yeah. So step one would be kind of clarity on kind of where you are, where you want to go on some level. And then step two would be to identify who has achieved that level of success. Yeah. I take it.
So I think it's, first find the subject matter that you want mentorship with. Like, what's that topic area of your life that you would like some mentorship with? And then this is the one thing I think most human beings have a block with, and that is they're too private with their ambitions. Yeah. It's impossible for your entire friend network to know how to help you if they don't know what you're working on right now. And so, once you know what that subject matter is, whether it's like entrepreneurship and starting a business, or it's marketing, or it's parenting, the great thing is now, as opposed to when you and I first started out in business, there's this thing called social networks where it's really easy to spread a message out to your crowd and let them know, hey, I've been really reflecting a lot on my life and my goals that I have, and something that's missing is having some great leadership in this one area. So I'd love if any of you had any ideas of people that I could connect with on the subject of entrepreneurship or business or running a business or marketing or something, and just see what names get thrown out and see, you just don't know who has a connection into somebody.
Yeah.
So it's definitely find out what's that subject matter that you're trying to be better at, and then let people know about it. And so again, the quality of your network is going to define the quality of the results that you get from that. So if you've invested a big chunk of your life not really investing in a great group of people around you, then the quality of those answers you're going to get isn't going to be that great. But there's still probably one eagle in that crowd who might see that post or that email that you might send out or that text message or something, and could help you. And then you can also go to the book aisle. So one of my mentors, even though I just got done saying before about like, don't go out asking for mentorship right off the bat, I'm also going to contradict myself, because one of my greatest mentors that's exactly how I got him. So Harvey Dorfman, who wrote the book Coaching the Mental Game, is known as the Yoda of mental toughness, passed away a few years ago as well. But I reached out to him when I first started getting into the mental game world, because I came across his book and I was like, okay, here's someone who's not using a bunch of psychobabble crap that athletes are not going to use, propagated by some psychologist who's never actually played the sport or done work with any athletes, but just has some ideas. And here's someone who's just talking so matter-of-factly, swore like a truck driver, which I liked, being a farm kid. And so I reached out to him and just said, hi, Harvey, it's Todd Herman. We've never had the pleasure of meeting before, but, I've read Coaching the Mental Game over and over and over again. I'm just getting started out in this field, and I would love if you would allow me to come down and work for you for free on administrative stuff. I'm sure you're really busy and you'd love to write another book, because he had already had a couple of books, but you're just caught up in doing because it's just the reality of business.
Sure.
You're caught up in, taking care of that stuff, and I'd love to take it off your plate. That was my ask, was actually me going out, and I didn't say my internal ask was, this guy's going to mentor me, but I'm going to work for him for free.
Yeah.
And, so he called me back and he was like, all right, what's the angle here, kid? And I said, well, it's obvious. Like, I'm going to learn from osmosis just being around you.
Yeah.
But, I do know that you probably have some things that you want to work on. And, I get it. Like, when you're running a sole proprietorship business, you're probably caught up doing a lot of things. So I'd love to take him off your plate. And it was January, because it was the off season for baseball. That's where he was kind of known as baseball. And went back and forth a little bit. And he's like, all right. He's like, but you're not staying with me, right? That's his other question. He's like, you're not staying with me, right? You don't think you're going to stay with me? And I said, no, I'm not. I've got an aunt and uncle who live he was in North Carolina at the time.
Remember the story?
Yeah, I've got an aunt and uncle that live in the area, and I'm going to stay with them. He's like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't have an aunt and uncle that lived down there. And there was a Motel 6 that was about 15 minutes away from his place, and I stayed in a Motel 6 for $29 a night. And
how old were you back then?
Oh, this was 23-ish, something like that, 23, 24. And so, I went down there. I spent 33 days with him. And my seventh day there, Roger Clemens came down for his annual pilgrimage to spend a day with Harvey, because he was just the Yoda. Everyone came. Andy Pettit, Craig Biggio, like half day after day, and he let me sit in there and watch. And so here I am sitting with the best of the best, seeing how he works with the best of the best in sport. Well, I couldn't have read a book that could show me how to actually have a conversation or hear the challenges that those pro athletes are truly dealing with, right? I had so many assumptions that they would be challenged with. Like 89% of them had nothing to do with the sport itself. It had to do with like the administrative part of life almost. And just rapid acceleration. And then he ended up funneling me a lot of clients and customers. And so that's what blew up my business was that. So,
yeah, I remember you sharing that story a while ago. I was trying to piece together which mentor that was, because obviously you've had many.
He's phenomenal, man. Yeah.
And I guess one of the myths that you actually talk about in the PDF was it's for amateurs or for those who are just starting out. So how do mentors still play a role in your life, and what does that?
Oh yeah,
that
actually,
look like?
Tucker Max and I were just talking about this maybe a year ago, and we were talking about mentors. He's like, I know you're super big on mentors. He's like, I've never had a mentor. He's like, I think I'm a little bit too long in the tooth to get a mentor now. And I was like, dude, you're never too old. Like, there's so many areas of your life where you're still an amateur, right? Like you can't have mastered everything. Definitely writing. You're my mentor.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Tucker's my mentor.
Sure.
And on that, but yeah, no, you're never too old. So just that attitude. It's it's ego, or it's just the wrong definition of maybe how life works, that we get to a certain point and you can't teach old dogs new tricks and things like that. But no, I have consistently seen it where the people who operate at the highest levels are like, it's just a constant mission of where's my next mentor going to come from? It's this insatiable appetite for just wanting to be around the best and, really crafting their own future because of getting this osmosis from other people. So it's not just for that college kid who gets out and gets done playing volleyball at Penn State and reaches out to Todd to, how can I build a sports psych practice or mental game practice? No, it's for all levels, for sure.
So looking at kind of where you are, where you want to go, like what you want to learn specifically, and then putting it out to your network. If you have an existing network, that may connect up some dots for you. Or, I mean, we live in a beautiful time where you can reach out to almost anybody and find almost anybody's email address and those kind of things. And if you make a compelling enough offer, you'll be the signal in the noise. Like that's the one thing, even with like, Shep, how I reached out to Shep. I mean, he gets until I managed his Facebook account at one point in time, and he's not a big celebrity, but like I realized like how many messages these people get and how easy it is to just get lost in all of that. And kind of going above and beyond in my outreach. And then literally when I hopped on the phone with him, I said, "Listen, like I know, email and all that kind of stuff probably isn't, knowing he's an older guy, that it's probably not the best method of communication. I'll fly to Hawaii." Just for like a 15-minute conversation. If we hit it off, great. If we don't, no pressure expectations. I'll hop right back. Like I'm not making a vacation out of this. And that kind of stood out.
Did you have any doubt as to whether or not you were going to be able to pull off the 15-minute conversation?
I was nervous as hell standing outside his house. Like I was nervous the entire flight and all that kind of stuff. But being outside his house, I'm like, oh my God. I was incredibly nervous, but we really, really hit it off. And I was nervous more about because the reason I reached out to him, similar to what you did. Like I was very clear up front of like what I'm looking to get out of this or not. Like I told him I was a big fan. I stumbled across the documentary through mutual friends. Through friends of mine that told me to check it out. I've never felt the desire. Like honestly, watching that documentary, I'm like, this guy's like my long lost father. Like what people were saying about him in his 70s, I'm like, I want people to say that about me. And I've never felt that connection with anybody. Like I don't want to connect with big names for ego purposes or those kind of things. But I was like, if I could meet this guy one day, like that'd be great. Then I found out he was coming out with a book. And Zig Ziglar, looping back to Zig, he has a saying that you go from survival, sustainability to success, and then success to significance. And the one thing I realized is a lot of people who are very successful at what they do, oftentimes that next level for them is that significance piece. So whether that be writing a book or speaking to colleges or those kind of things, if you can help them with that next phase, it's of high value to them. And so I found out he was coming out with a book. I ended up emailing him a few times and always got blocked by his lovely assistant, Nancy, who's fantastic, but she's great at the job she does, which is blocking people, and ended up finding his email address, and I emailed him and CC'd her to be like, shoot, I told you I'd get through type thing. And he ended up replying back and said, we went back and forth. I said, listen, I know you're coming out with a book.
That's in my wheelhouse.
I said, listen, like I have a lot of friends and I was very clear of like my skills and expertise as well. I said, listen, like I've written a book, like, and it did well on Amazon. But I have a lot of friends who've had New York Times bestselling books, and I'm assuming your intention putting out this book to the world is to hit New York Times or for the message to get out there. And I said, listen, I'm a huge fan of your message, and if I can get it out there, I know book marketing requires a lot of heavy lifting. And I said, I'll be transparent with you up front. This is really odd outreach for me, because I don't want anything from you, and that's kind of. I wish I did want something from you, so it could be clear, but I don't. I'm just a huge fan of you and a huge fan of the message, and that kind of stood out, I guess. And then we hopped on a call. I flew to Maui. He was kind enough to extend his home to me during that stay, and Yeah, we're there for a couple of days. We really hit it off, and that's how kind of it happened. But to one point that you talked about, and Shep is still a very good friend and all those kind of things. But one of the myths that you talked about is that it's a long-term relationship, that like it's a forever thing. Mm-hmm. And once I supported him with a book, and he came to MMT, and he's like all that kind of stuff, I was like, dude, there's not a lot of commonalities kind of that hold us together. And that was kind of a little bit hard to hard pill to swallow on some level.
Yeah.
But I mean, we still communicate by email, but it's not as frequent and not as much as before. So it's good to also realize like it's like mentorship is not this like 10, 15 year relationship.
Yeah.
It can be a couple emails, could be a couple months. Like understanding it's nothing necessarily long term, and it's super flexible.
Yeah.
Again, it's not sitting down once a month. It can be.
Yeah.
But really, you and your mentor can kind of design that structure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it just. I don't know. I think people should be very mindful of the spirit that they're in when they send a message, because it just, I don't know what happens, but it permeates through the words. But like if you're feeling desperate, your choice of words will come across.
Yeah.
But because I see it, I mean, I get pinged a lot, especially by a lot of young athletes, and there's a lot of because of the platform with business stuff online, and there's a young guy from Germany who just reached out to me just before Christmas time, a couple weeks before Christmas. And there's just something about the way that he did it. His ask was pretty much the same as everyone else's ask almost, but there's just something about it. So that's what caused me to kind of reach back out, and, I'm helping him out with a couple of things. But you almost get a sense of someone's intention, and that they truly do believe what they're saying is true for them, that they feel like that there's something big that they're about to do. They just can't seem to. They just need some help.
Yeah.
And I'll help.
Yeah, I mean, putting effort into that first impression is crucial.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just very sloppy with it. Into what you said, it's so weird that you can just the placement of words, all the same words, but just how they're sequenced and all that kind of stuff gives off a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always kind of look to is there's a saying from 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, which is what works in the military works in marketing, and that's the unexpected. Mm-hmm. So I think of like somebody like let's say a Shep who gets a couple hundred Facebook messages a day or a couple hundred emails a day. How can I make my email stand out in that sea of email? So maybe it's a video email, or maybe it's sending something traditionally like direct mail or handwritten note, like what you've done, and those kind of things.
Or my friend, just a new friend, really, Stu Heinecke, who wrote a great book called How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. He's a cartoonist for The New Yorker. If you ever want a connection with Stu, I'll hook you up. So amazing book, but it's all about, when you're trying to get to the top level people, an email just doesn't cut it. So for me, like when I was breaking out into the sports world, like I said, I don't even know if I told you this story. My first direct mail piece that I sent out was I went to Canadian Tire, which is like for those Americans and other people out there, it's like the Walmart of Canada. And I went to Canadian Tire and I bought 16 hockey pucks, went home and I bought a hacksaw and I cut every single hockey puck in half and had cement glue, and I wrote a letter and left room in the upper right-hand area, and on the upper left is a picture of me. And my headline said, just like you can't play hockey with half a hockey puck, you can't develop an NHL caliber athlete by only focusing on their skills and something like that, their physical self. And then it got into just developing mental game stuff or whatever. And I mean, I was so green behind the ears when I sent this, making a lot of assumptions. And I stuck half the hockey puck on the page, and then I mailed it. So lumpy mail, and I mailed it off to all of the 16 Western Conference teams because I lived in Western Canada at the time, and I couldn't mail them to the Eastern Conference teams because when I looked at how much the cost of travel was, I wasn't going to have enough money if someone said yes. So I was like, well, I could drive to pretty much, I could fly down to LA, and that was not an expensive flight. And so I mailed them all off, and I had 32 total half hockey pucks, mailed them to the coach and the GM of every single team. And then I waited, and I FedExed them, lumpy mail. That cost me $1,118.56. Never forget that amount. Mailed them off, and then I waited a few days, And then I started calling West Coast over, and I called the Vancouver Canucks, and Dave Nonis was the GM there at the time. And I called in and I said, hi, is Dave in, please? Thinking that it was, and she was like, yeah, can I let him know who's calling? I'm like, holy shit, I'm actually going to talk to the GM this quickly. And I was like, yeah, can you just let him know that it's Todd Herman? She's like, hey, you're the half hockey puck guy. And I was like, sure. Yes, I am. And I could hear her yelling, hey, Dave, do you want to talk to the hockey puck guy? And he's like, yeah, send him through. And there's a whole bunch of people in his office, so he put me on speakerphone. There's like 4 other coaches that were in the room. He's like, the half hockey puck guy, that's one of the best pieces of mail I've ever gotten. That's hilarious. Da, da, da. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, I wasn't really trying to be super funny.
Yeah.
But whatever. And so we ended up chatting for like 90 minutes. And then they already had someone that they were working with, Saul Miller, who's like, the Yoda of hockey, very famous mental game guy, amazing man. And but they said, just like anybody, like not everyone likes working with Saul. So I'm going to put you in contact with a few agents who I know that their players don't work with Saul really. And that's how it all started. I had 3 major agents that I worked with, and they funneled a lot of clients my way too.
Did you do this with a fish?
I did it with a fish too. Yeah, so that was when I wanted to get a gig at Intuit, because Intuit's head office was in Edmonton. That's where I lived at the time. Yeah. And this one role was like a really great opportunity for me to kind of sharpen some business skills. So, but they wanted someone with like a college degree. Actually, they wanted an MBA, and I was nowhere near even the college degree part. I had 1 year, played college football, and then left. And so I went to the toy store, I bought a plush fish toy, like a stuffed fish toy for a kid. And stuck a note to it, like stabbed a note to it. And it said, I'm like a fish out of water waiting for the opportunity for this upcoming role. I know I'm perfect for it. And then I had my CV in behind it, sent it, took it in. At the time I knew, because I actually went out and surveilled Intuit for 3 days straight to see when the CEO would show up. So I went in and I dropped it off a couple minutes before he would arrive. So he would see it on the front desk area. And so he picked it up, saw it. Bruce went and took it straight to the head of HR and said, these are the types of people we need in this organization. And that's how I got the gig.
Dude, you make me feel like a chump. Here I am doing video emails or something like that. You're sending these fishes, and you're thinking outside the box, man. Yeah. That's amazing.
Well, I got a friend's son, the job of a lifetime here in New York City, doing that exact same thing, sending a CEO of a company, major company here in New York City, who's Canadian, from Quebec. I said, send him some maple syrup. Make sure it's Canadian maple syrup, though. None of this U.S. stuff.
No Aunt Jemima?
Sent him some Canadian maple syrup and said, because he had his resume into the company for a while and wasn't getting any traction, and said, something like, here's a little taste of home. And that was kind of basically, he had something else to elaborate on the fact that he had a resume in there, but here's a taste of home. And then he got a job.
It's the funny thing is that like I think it's also important to note like the puck thing. I know when you were talking about, you're like, it was some of it like, would you do it again? Like maybe not. Like it was a little, I don't say amateurish, but it was.
Oh, it was total kitschy.
But the thing is like it's you receive something like that. It's like endearing. Yeah, it catches their and then it reminds me of like when I was and it comes full circle with the outreach for a mentor. Is I remember my first ever business. I was 12 years old. It was a lawn cutting and snow shoveling business back home. And I remember sending out all these flyers of like, I was going to cut lawns, all this kind of stuff. And it was probably, I sent probably 450 of these things out. And basically I got no response.
Yeah.
The last 50, I'm like, I'm just going to write a personal note at the bottom saying like, hey, I'm a 13-year-old boy, blah, blah, blah. Just want to support, whatever, do stuff in the community. Out of those 50 that I did, I got like, I think it was like 12 clients from. So just like showcasing the importance of like vulnerability and just being you, not trying to portray something you're not. Just like how I reached out to Shep and I didn't say I'm some master book marketer, but I'll definitely try my best.
Yeah. You know what? In like when I my first sales job, I was working with Xerox doing door-to-door sales, in New York City doing business stuff. And I was terrible, Jason. I was so bad. But then after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in and I walked in. I didn't really plan it, and I just walked in. And she seemed like she was a nice lady. Not that she said anything to me, but I walked up and I said, listen, I'm not really very good at this, but I need to sell to somebody. Mm-hmm. I'm just a farm kid from Southern Alberta. And as soon as I said the farm kid thing, she's like, oh my God, my grandparents, they had a farm. And so I just kept on using that whole I'm a farm kid.
Yeah.
And that opened up all these doors because I was all some relatable. I wasn't, it humanized this guy who was there to sell, printers and copiers or whatever. So now, does that work for you when you're experienced? Not necessarily, no.
Sure.
But to your point about the whole hockey puck thing is amateurish. Yeah, but it's also endearing, off the bat. Like if someone had sent it that was, very experienced, they might have done it in a better way too. But yeah.
So we talked about basically finding a mentor, what that looks like. I guess the structure of the relationship is variable. There's no kind of rule. What is one of the and also that it's not it doesn't have to be an ongoing relationship. When it does come to a close, what is one of the best ways to honor that relationship? Is there something in particular that you could do to honor it, or anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think the best way of honoring that relationship is to continuously talk about its importance in your life. Like that's how I think I do it with Harvey and Jim and Grant and other people that have been there for me. I think that's one of the great ways. I mean, you could probably send gifts. You're probably John's better at both of us than at sending gifts,
that's
right?
His jam.
That's his jam. So I haven't really thought it through necessarily of like how you honor it a ton going forward, but I think constantly actually finding more. The one thing I did do consistently is always finding other ways of supporting that person going forward too. So like Harvey, there was a lot of times where I got contacted about media stuff where I wasn't the right person because they were actually looking for someone who did have more experience, and I'd be like, that's the guy, you got to go get Harvey and that stuff was never lost on him at all. And I'm like, well, of course I need to do this for you because you took a bet on me kind of thing.
Yeah.
So any chance you can get to put those other people up on a platform for themselves, I think is a great way of honoring it too.
Well, Todd Herman, you're a beautiful man, a mentor of mine, and dude, just a huge fan of yours. So not a couple things. Obviously you have the book coming out sometime 2018, 2019. 90-day year is something we didn't chat about, obviously, because you were kind enough to focus on the topic of mentorship. Yeah. But I've gone through 90-day year program. I've had a lot of we have mutual friends who have gone through the program. It's been hugely impactful. Is that something that's available all year round, or is it only?
Yeah. So in the past, we've always just made it available as a program a couple times a year, but now we're going to be rolling it out basically available pretty much most of the year now, starting. Well, by the time this gets out to people, it'll probably be already available. Yeah. So, and it's my high performance system for. It started in sports, worked into corporate, and now it's the one that's online right now is specifically for entrepreneurs and business owners to plug in a system to help them stay really focused to get things done and achieved in a fast time frame.
And that's 90dayyear.com.
Yeah. And
toddherman.me.
You got it.
For the mentorship PDF that I keep referring to. There's so much gold in here. And then we'll also put it in the Community Made group as well, so you have access to it in there. But that's it, dude.
Anything for you, man.
Thank you.
Anything for you.
Oh, beautiful time. Thanks, man.
You bet.
So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. As a quick reminder, Todd wrote a fantastic mini book called How to Find and Become a Mentor, which served as a foundation for the structure of my last episode, The Wisest Investment is Wisdom. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend you check it out. To get access to Todd's free guide, visit toddherman.me/blog, or just go to toddherman.me and click on the blog. You'll see an opportunity there to leave your email address and you'll get the PDF version. Again, I can't say enough about it. I told him, I think I may mention of it in this episode, how bloody good it is. Second, in the last episode, I shared a high-level overview of a mentoring session worksheet that has worked really well for me over the years. So to get access to that, to kind of support you in your mentor-mentee sessions, or even if you're in a mastermind of sorts, the actual PDF can be found in the resource section of the Community Made group. If you're not a member, lucky for you, joining is free. Simply go to communitymade.com to get access. The third and final thing, I decided to take some of the concepts of this season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and go deeper in a intimate workshop setting, because I love facilitating workshops. I love face-to-face type environments and experiences. And we announced the first workshop sold out before we launched season 2. So we announced a second workshop date. So for dates and availability on that, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. If you enjoyed this episode, show some love to Todd by taking a screenshot of your podcast app and pinging him on Instagram at Todd, TODD _ Herman, HERMAN. For more details on Todd, again, visit toddherman.me or 90dayyear.com. Before I go, I got to give a shout out to Christy Birch for leaving the following review on iTunes. She said, being an event producer myself, I've been a fan of Jason's ever since I heard about MMT. His heart for creating true connection at his events and the excellence in which he executes is inspiring to me. I was naturally excited to dive into this podcast when it launched, and it has not disappointed. Right off the bat, I resonated with episode 2, Scaling is Stupid, because I've secretly felt the same way, but been shy to express it in this go big or go home culture of entrepreneurship, which is so prevalent. The production quality is top notch, which makes it fun to listen to, and Jason is so well connected. I know he'll always have high caliber guests with interesting subject matter. Thank you, Jason, for all the work that you're doing to educate and inspire. Thank you, Christy, for the review. I really appreciate it. We have a handful of mutual friends, so I'm looking forward to crossing paths in the near future. For the rest of you out there, if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and like what we're doing here at Community Made, I would be forever grateful if you would share this podcast with your friends or leave an honest review on iTunes or Facebook, just like Christy did. That stuff goes a long way. I really appreciate it. Join me for the next episode where I'll be tackling one of the most frequently asked questions that I get, which is how to manage your relationships or how to manage your network. So I'll be sharing the 5 categories of relationships and the practical steps you can take to nurture them each step of the way, why the key to a strong network is subtraction and not addition, and how to constantly be reinvesting in existing relationships and micro-investing in new ones. I'll see you on the next episode. Enjoy your week.